I'm the one with the gavel.
Now we're started.
Welcome.
No, that was one.
Welcome to Three Distinct Hogs. I'm David Riley.
I'm Nicholas Harvey.
And tonight we have some very special guests with us who are presiding masters or past masters of lodges. First, we have from Jewel P. Lightfoot Lodge number 1283 on the rolls of the Most Worshipful Grand Lodge of Texas, Worshipful David Bindel.
Hello.
And from Amicable Lodge, my mother lodge in Cambridge, Massachusetts, we have Worshipful Nicholas Holmes Batzell.
Good evening, brethren.
And from Harmonia Lodge number 138 on the rolls of the Most Worshipful Grand Lodge of Florida, we have Worshipful Charley Hogwood.
Good evening, gentlemen. Glad to be here.
And so the plan tonight is to talk about what it's like to be master of a Masonic lodge and what advice presiding masters and past masters might give men who are foolishly considering, who are volunteering themselves for leadership in the fraternity. But before we get to that, as is traditional, we're going to have a rant. Tonight, Nick is doing the ranting.
All right, so I've visited quite a few lodges spanning a few different jurisdictions, and it's always intriguing to get a sense of the personality of the lodge as an outsider. Are they more social or serious? Are there cliques and circles, or does everyone genuinely long for the fellowship with each brethren there? During the Knights of an Entered Apprentice degree, are there a lot of goat jokes, or is the candidate's initiatory experience the most important thing on the planet at that moment for each member of the lodge? One of the driving factors of what shapes a lodge is how the Worshipful Master runs his year in the East. Elevated to the highest honor within the lodge, his duty is to ensure the craft is set to work and focuses on participation, education, fellowship, membership, a whole lot of things, while trying to keep out the negativity that might happen because we're human. This allows the lodge to prevail with peace and harmony. He is to preserve the history of this ancient and accepted fraternity while ensuring the cement of brotherly love binds us together far into the future. Right Worshipful Walter Hunt from the Grand Lodge of Massachusetts has a quote from his video that I think sums this up nicely. He says, "And when he's done, he puts his tools down and somebody else picks them up. And if he did a good job, if he has built his part of the wall, metaphorically speaking, well enough, when somebody picks up those tools, they get to build on what he did. They don't have to fix what he didn't do." Unfortunately, whether elected or appointed, some members of our fraternity let the title go to their head. They believe that somehow they're above cleaning another dirty plate or joining an investigation committee because it's not his job anymore. Early last year, I was in a public place and bumped into a 50-year Mason who has been a past master, current Right Worshipful, past district deputy, grand master, etc. Really nice guy. He was with his wife and I was with my fiance, so I made the usual introduction. He raised his hand, stopped me, and said, "It's Right Worshipful." I stopped, smiled, and continued introducing them using their first and last names. We were in public, not lodge, and my fiance has zero reason or care to call him a Right Worshipful. On the complete other side of that experience, a very dear friend of mine has received some of the highest honors and titles available in Masonry, but he has never introduced himself by anything other than brother name. I asked a few of his friends if they knew about these honors, to which they looked confused and said, "Him? Are you sure?" He's never said anything about that, and I've known him for years. Simon Sinek, author of Start With Why, explains this well. He begins, "A former Secretary of Defense gave a speech at a large conference. He took his place on the stage and began talking, sharing his prepared remarks with the audience. He paused to take a sip of coffee from the styrofoam cup he brought on the stage with him. He took another sip, looked down at the cup, and smiled. He said, "You know, I spoke here last year. I presented at the same conference on the same stage. But last year, I was still an undersecretary. I flew here in business class, and when I landed, there was somebody waiting for me at the airport to take me to my hotel. Upon arriving at the hotel, there was somebody else waiting for me. I was already checked in, and they handed me my key and escorted me to my room. The next morning, again, there was somebody waiting for me. I was driven to the venue, and I was taken in the back entrance, and I was handed a cup of coffee in a beautiful ceramic cup. He goes on to say that he's no longer the undersecretary, and that he flew here coach. He had to check himself into his own hotel, and he had to find his own cup of coffee that just so happened to be in a styrofoam cup. It occurred to him, he said, the ceramic cup they gave me last year was never meant for me at all. It was meant for the role I filled. And when I left that role, they will give the ceramic cup to the person who replaces me, because I only ever deserved a styrofoam cup. These humbling words reminded me that our title is primarily, first and foremost, brothers. We are to meet upon the level and part upon the square. So tonight on Three Distinct Knocks, we have our current and past masters, and I'm really, really excited to hear about what they did in their year in the East, how they made their lodge successful and the different trials that they went through and how they prevailed. David and I both agree that these are some of the most successful masters that we know personally, and we're excited to have them on, and we thank you guys for coming on.
So, David Bindel, why don't we start with you, because it's always interesting to hear about what's happening in the great state of Texas. You're the master of Lightfoot Lodge. And I have to start off by saying that is among my favorite lodge names ever, mainly because I think Lightfoot's Manual of the Lodge is one of the best Masonic documents ever written. If people aren't familiar with it, it's available on eBay and on used book sites. Don't pay too much money of it. There's thousands of copies out there. Sometimes people try to charge a lot of money for copies, but get it and read his commentaries. Having said that, what has your year in the East been like?
Well, I was installed nearly a year ago. I actually only have about 4 more weeks in office as master of the lodge. And, I've been installed, and we've initiated a handful of new men into the craft. We have, shortly before I became master of the lodge, the Grand Lodge of Texas and the Prince Hall Grand Lodge of Texas amended the compact that they have to allow intervisitation. And so during my term as master, we were actually able to host the Deputy Grand Master of the Prince Hall Grand Lodge of Texas. And that was a really meaningful event. It was one of the first times that that an intervisitation had occurred in the state of Texas between the so-called mainstream Grand Lodge and the Prince Hall Grand Lodge. And moreover, it was an opportunity for one of the Grand Lodge officers of the Prince Hall Grand Lodge to come and speak at a lodge. And to the best of my knowledge, that's the first time that that actually happened in Texas. So that was pretty meaningful. We've also had some fellow craft degrees, and in just a couple of nights, I'm going to be raising a Master Mason for the first time personally. And we're really looking forward to that. It's something that hasn't happened in our lodge in about 1.5 years. So we're very excited about what's going on. And we've also continued a program of Masonic education, which we call Building the Temple. And I'd be happy to talk more about that if you'd like to go down that route.
Yeah. So I joke that there's certain times in a master's term and immediately before his term that always stick in your mind. For example, the night that you're elected master and you realize, oh, I'm really in for it now. The moment when you're installed and you first take your seat in the East and you realize everybody's looking at me and I have no idea what to do right now. The first time you make a Mason and you do your first standard apprentice degree and you have that moment when you make a Mason that I remember very distinctly, very clearly that moment. The first time you raise a Mason, Master Mason, that moment sticks in your head forever. I think it's one of those things that will live with you and will spring to mind each and every time you see a third degree after that. It's just an amazing experience. So I look forward to hearing your thoughts on it after the event.
Great. Well, I look forward to sharing them with you soon.
Nick, Batzell, you similarly are nearing the end of your term as Master of Amicable Lodge. What's your time in the East been like?
I feel that it's best equated to an experience of living out the trials of the degrees in a complete way, in that, you know, we speak a lot about the trials going through the degrees that you discover, you know, certain obstructions in your way, or you're asked who comes here, you're asked in whom you put your trust. I think that the year of Master is in many ways living that experience out throughout the year and as a team leader. It's an evolving experience as well. I don't think that any one component of the lodge outshines any of the other ones. I don't think that one guiding philosophy outshines any of the others. I don't think there's been one consistent feeling that I've had, aside from, you know, dedication and significance of, you know, how important this is to me and how important it is to my brothers. So tremendously intriguing and evolving and exhausting and wonderful experience. It's like, but it's been really good and it's been really bad. It's been tough to make hard choices, but at the same time, it's wonderful to celebrate the fraternity that you love with the brothers that you love. And being the first servant of the lodge is an honor every time you get to work for the lodge. So.
Thanks. Yeah, I think, you know, I think the idea of being a master being a time when you learn more about yourself than anyone else is absolutely true. You suddenly discover that all that stuff that you thought was going to be so easy, that you knew how to do so well, that you didn't understand why the previous guy didn't get it right, you suddenly figure out, oh, that's why that doesn't work.
Yeah.
Yeah. All right.
You begin to see the significance of the change of title from brother to worshipful, to understand that it when you're the worshipful master, you start to feel and experience and see the buck stopping with you, and taking that seriously and recognizing that any failure to appropriately deal with something inevitably weighs on the lodge. And if you've served in the line and you've gone through the stations, you know that decisions that weigh on the lodge can be very heavy and can be compounding problems, and you find out that you have to deal with them the best to your ability. Yeah. And then you look back and realize that you probably should have done something else.
Yeah, I think hindsight as a master is the reason that past masters are often too free with advice.
Well, I mean, while we're on this subject, David, you've been immensely helpful to me, and I'm speaking of moments that one will never forget in the fraternity, being installed by you, and at the end of the ceremony, you standing there with me installed, and both of us looking at each other and saying, "How did we get in this position?"
Well, in my case, it was, "How did I let this happen?" But yeah, same idea. Yeah, I think past masters, part of what motivates them giving advice in all seriousness is that they see they see all the things that they wish they would have known when they were master, and they try really hard to offer that up. I made it a rule for myself early on that I wouldn't give advice unless asked. And I've tried really hard to stick to that. That I won't say I've been perfect, as Nick will doubtless remind me.
Yeah.
But I've tried really hard. I had to move to Florida to try to avoid giving it up.
And he still shows up sometimes.
Yeah, exactly. Worshipful Charley, my understanding is that you were, during your year that Harmonia sort of made it to the next level, that there was a change in the culture and experience of the lodge during your year. How long ago was that?
I'm the junior past master, so last year was my year, and our year runs from essentially beginning of January to beginning of January. So I cannot take all the credit for last year, and here's the setup for how Harmonia Lodge went. About 7 years ago, our lodge was faltering, failing, and about to collapse, believe it or not. And we were blessed with one of the most iconic Masons, the most I've ever met. And that was Jim Kirby. And he and a couple of the other guys said, hey, you know, guys, we've got to do something here. And they implemented a couple of programs and turned that around. He and John Allen and a couple of the other guys were able to implement some programs that found a way to attract new blood, to young the place up, if you will, and to figure out how to financially keep the lodge going. And we were lucky in that the building that we have, we own the building, and that building also has commercial tenant space on 2 stories, which allows us to keep going. That allowed us the funding to be able to put things back into our lodge. So once we were able to pay some bills and then attract the right kind of people through our visitors program, which is second to none. I got to tell you, you guys have seen it, how our visitors program works and how we gain interest. We have the best way I can really explain it is we have like a conveyor belt. When somebody walks into the lodge, we have one goal. That is, those people are to walk in and say, we're family. Where have you been? We've been waiting for you. And everybody that walks in the door gets a handshake by just about everybody in the lodge. Don't know who they are off the street. And you make them feel welcome. And I was fortunate enough to be able to continue those programs with those people behind the scenes running these programs and keeping things going. And that's really, I was just standing on the shoulders of these giants. And when I say giants, these guys really are. They're knowledgeable. The other David Riley that we have down there, I mean, between Dave Riley, Jim Kirby, and we've got our secretary, Lou Babbitt's down there, Tony from the year before me. These guys are all working behind the scenes as a team. All I could do is grab the reins on this thing and hold on for my entire year, because that's how that lodge runs. I mean, it runs. It goes like a bat out of the cage, if you will. And but it can get away from you pretty quickly. And so I would say that my year really was get in, hold on, shut up when you need to shut up, let these other guys build on that experience, delegate some authority, and listen. And listen when somebody tells you when something's not working out. And we get a lot of stuff done behind the scenes so that when the craft shows up, there's no bickering, there's no discussion that would be unbecoming, because we've already figured out our position on things. We've already decided what is worth bringing up and what's, worth putting a committee together to deal with. I mean, so that's why when you see what goes on in Harmonia Lodge, it looks pretty smooth, because we've prepared the most behind the scenes. And I was just really lucky that I had a depth of knowledge and leadership that would keep us going. and the line coming up, it didn't hurt that we've got chefs in the kitchen that feed everybody like a 4 or 5 star restaurant down there. Ricky and the crowd, they love cooking, and they really have. You keep people's bellies full, you make them feel welcome, and you live up to your obligation of making the good men better. And what I added on to that was, I'm not really making good men better. We're not doing that. We're providing the opportunity for those guys to make themselves better by presenting all of those opportunities to get involved in the committees, get involved in the events that we have going on, get into those degrees and do all of that stuff. And if you keep people involved and feed them and treat them like family, they pretty much keep coming back. And that's why you see that stack of petitions when you go down there. So that's kind of how my year went.
Now, I think it's interesting that Masons often spend a lot of time rehearsing the ritual, but they don't. Somehow we've forgotten, or in a lot of places we've forgotten, that you have to spend just as much time behind the scenes taking care of the non-ritual part. It's almost like we expect the business part of the meeting to just happen and magically be okay.
Sure. I was installed in January, and in February we had a baby. So last year was definitely a roller coaster for us. And yes, the behind the scenes made all of the difference in the world. Having a great secretary who understands things and pretty much shoves stuff in my face and says, sign here, really took a lot of the load off of me for having to make sure I wasn't getting myself in trouble somehow. So that's great.
Secretaries are incredibly important, and finding a secretary who understands the sort of the division of the role between the secretary and the master and is willing to do the work and not do more than the work is really an important thing, I think.
That is a great difference. There's a little bit of a labor stratification there, a division of labor that you got to deal with. And when you talk about, how the lodge and why we are really there, one of the biggest, if I could really boil it down and say our lodge might have a lot of show value and a lot of, we might be cutting edge on a lot of stuff, but we really have got to be careful and remember why we're there. People come and they think they're eating at a fancy restaurant. Our dues are low. I mean, really, at the end of the day, our dues are pretty low. Our meals are cheap, and we eat really well. But we're not a commercial restaurant. We're not there to put on a show. We are there to get the guys through the jobs, to get them through the line and encourage those up-and-coming guys to take on those roles. And you've got to let people fail. You even got to let the master fail. If that's what it takes to get that lodge running right, people have got to fail to learn. If you continue to pick up the reins and do things for them, like you're saying, David, if the secretary picks up the reins and runs the lodge, that's not leadership. That's circumventing the process. We got to let people fail.
Mm-hmm. I often compare it to, there's a great BBC comedy that Margaret Thatcher said was the most accurate depiction of British politics ever put on TV. I think it says something that it was a comedy, but anyway, it's Yes, Minister. And the show focuses primarily on the relationship between the cabinet officer, the minister for a department that doesn't exist. They made it up. The Minister for Administrative Affairs, and his civil servant, who's in British titles. He's the permanent secretary, and I think permanent secretary, maybe that's what made it stick in my head, that it's a good analogy to a Masonic lodge, because we often have permanent secretaries, and and that division of labor between the person who's supposed to be making the policy and the person who's supposed to be implementing it, the person who handles the administration and the person who's supposed to be driving the ideas, that kind of division of labor is very analogous to a Masonic lodge. And it has the same problems evidently in British government that it does in Masonic lodges, I think.
Absolutely. And it comes to you're really looking at, you're getting people to show up. And right, in these days there are too many draws for people's attention. There's social media, there's TV, everybody's got sports with the kids. There's a lot going on, and to keep to get the younger guys into the lodge. And that's what we've got to have. We've got to come back to that, the art of manliness, that, those days of, getting the community leaders to go out and be something different. You got to take care for their time. You've really got to give them a reason to show up, use their time wisely, give them the information that they need. When they leave, they want to have a nice full belly. They want to feel happy and feel a part of the family and look forward to coming back. If you drag your meetings on, and if you're not organized and you have bickering in the general lodge meeting, that kind of stuff, the visitors will see that. The visitors can sense that when they walk into the hall the very first time. That's why we walk everybody around and show them everything and, introduce them to everybody. That's what makes Harmonia Lodge so good. It really is. It's a wonderful place. I love being there because we have that culture in the lodge.
It is a very friendly lodge, and there's a deliberateness about the hospitality that I think is admirable. David, it has long been my contention, spoken loudly, repetitively, single-mindedly, that younger Masons want Masonic education. You mentioned that your lodge started a new Masonic education program.
Absolutely. This was something that we actually did last year when I was the senior warden. We've for several years now had some sort of a Masonic education program at Jewel P. Lightfoot Lodge. But last year we kind of made it a bit more branded. We gave it the name Building the Temple. And this became a monthly occurrence. My lodge, by the way, meets every week, which personally I feel is a bit too often.
Every week?
But
wow.
Yeah, every Thursday. So if anyone is ever in the Dallas area on a Thursday, please come check us out. This Building the Temple program, we had such Masonic luminaries as Chuck Dunning talking about dialogue. We had Robert Hurd talking about leadership and vision. We had Kevin Main talking about the nature of initiation. We had a talk about Lightfoot's world back in the year 1915 when he was Grandmaster. We've had talks on Hermeticism. We've had talks on many different forms of Masonry from around the world and from a lot of different perspectives. And this Building the Temple night is something that we dedicate that night to making sure that we have a fulfilling and meaningful Masonic experience. And we don't deal with any of the other business of the lodge that may be a bit more mundane or administrative or mechanical. We focus purely on making sure that the level of Masonry happening in the lodge that night is, bar none, the best. And we finish it off nearly all the time with an agape feast, which is an opportunity for us to continue our dialogue around the table, break bread with brothers, and have more discussion. And one of the programs that we also have at Building the Temple is it's our opportunity for our entered apprentices and our fellow crafts and our new Master Masons, after they've had a bit of time after receiving a degree to digest it, to come back to the lodge and present their work piece or their masterpiece if they're a Master Mason on how the degree has transformed them. The night that they receive a degree, on the night of their initiation or their fellow craft or Master Mason degree, the master encourages that candidate to pay very close attention because there's going to be a transformation in your life if the degree had any effect at all. If it's going to have any effect, there will be transformation because it's supposed to make you a better man. Mm-hmm. And so we encourage the candidate to pay very close attention to himself, to the way that he treats people around him, to the way that he interacts with others, and the realizations and growth that he witnesses in himself. And then to come back to the lodge and share it with his brothers. And that's very intimate, but the lodge is a place where brothers can trust each other. And it's one of the few places in modern manhood, I think, where men can actually kind of open up. It's not uncommon to see a brother cry in lodge or at the dinner table, because he's really opening up and sharing something deep within himself. And you know, that kind of experience is something that really can only happen in a trusting environment. And at Jewel P. Lightfoot Lodge, we've cultivated that environment, and it's amazing. And the brothers always leave feeling fulfilled, like they've had a very meaningful experience.
Do you think your education program is particularly attractive to millennials?
I think so. I know that most of the men who come to my lodge, well, I'll say this. Most of the active men in my lodge are between the ages of 25 and 45. We really don't have many past masters involved. We have a lot of past masters, but being a younger lodge, I've seen a tendency for recent past masters to move away or get drawn away by family or other job responsibilities and that kind of thing. So it's a very young lodge as far as membership makeup goes, but we're coming up on our 75th anniversary later this year in December. So, you know, it's kind of a unique situation. We don't have the Past Masters Guild running the show at all. We have a couple of past masters who are involved on a pretty regular basis, but that's it. And you know, that's both a blessing and a little bit of a curse, I guess. Just because it would be nice to have more of the older generations around. But yes, millennial men are really looking for that meaningful Masonic education experience. We don't want just the degree or just the lecture given to us. We don't want rote memorization. We're looking for more knowledge and wisdom in Masonry. And we find it by discussing the Masonic transformative experiences that we go through.
Yeah. My experience is that a lot of the younger candidates that I've worked with, I used to do candidate education for Amicable, and it's probably the thing that I miss most about not being in Massachusetts anymore. But the younger the guy, the more likely it was that he would say something along the lines of that he was looking for a spiritual experience, a initiatory experience, a transformative experience that was non-dogmatic, that respected his intellect, respected his right to have his own beliefs and have his own questions. And I think Freemasonry can fulfill that for guys in a way that almost no other institution can.
I agree. And, you know, when we have these building the temple meetings, and when we have these discussions at our agape feasts, it isn't just a presentation, but it's also, it becomes a dialogue, and it becomes a place where brethren can ask questions, not just for the brother who's presented, but generally to place a question on the floor of the lodge and allow the lodge to discuss it. And, you know, brothers can provide insights that they may have. And it becomes a place for sharing and getting different perspectives on Masonry.
Yeah. Nick, I know that a lot of your energy has gone into ensuring the future of the lodge, financially, structurally, and in other ways. But before we get to that, I know that the education program, one of your goals when we talked before you became master, which you said you wanted to slow down the degrees so that there was so that there was more time between degrees, so that the lodge had more time to do more education activities. How has that gone?
Well, you know, some things are not always what you expect, as I noted earlier. We have been able to, you know, I don't feel that I've accomplished what I would have wanted originally or what I would have expected, but I think that, as the other Worshipfuls will attest to, I think that you discover that the year has other things in store for you. That you draw your designs on the trestle board, but you find that you should engage in different things. The education I mean, it's so deeply incumbent upon having great educators and having great candidates who are engaging with the education. When that works perfectly, it's a beautiful thing. You'll see these candidates every single week, and they profoundly engage themselves in using Masonry as an adaptive tool on their life. And in that regard, I'm incredibly happy. Slowing the degree work down, I didn't feel that I was able to do that as much, but indeed, we have spaced them out over the years in a better manner. But, you know, there's always striving for better.
Yeah. When I was master, I wanted to slow it down too, and I think you've been more successful than I was in that regard.
Yeah,
so congratulations.
Yeah, I think that you see oftentimes from year to year, Worshipful Masters will say that they have the same goals as their predecessors and eventually their successors as well. And you sort of go through the line and you think, well, why do they keep trying to do the same thing? And you realize that once you try to engage with that task, you often find that you think your efforts could go further, and you do want to encourage the people who came behind, who've come after you, to not, as we noted earlier, rebuild or repair work that has been done before, but to continue building on it, and continue building on it with the knowledge of what you've succeeded in and what you haven't succeeded in.
Yeah. You had quite a huge accomplishment in ensuring that the lodge's financial future was taken care of, and that you did that thing that lodges so rarely do these days. You raised dues. What was that like?
You know, to say that that was something that I did in my year would be a bit of a misnomer. It was something that was accomplished while I was in the East. So many brothers are responsible for it, not just in the way that we executed the plan, but in preparing the lodge for successive years of leadership to engage with itself more critically, and to have the brothers say, you know, I want a greater experience out of this and I'm willing to give more. And that continued experience and that continued understanding eventually got to a point where, in examining where our lodge was, we decided, you know, this is the time this makes the most sense. And you know, as I noted before, your year gives you different challenges than you expected. I did not think that I would be the master who would get dues increase passed. But when it came time, I saw that it was the right moment, and I saw that kicking the can down the road just made no sense. So I decided that I should engage with it thoroughly. And I had a huge amount of help from past masters and from line officers in getting advice, in examining what problems might arise, and engaging with those problems. I'm especially indebted to my treasurer, who put an immense amount of work and immense amount of fire under my behind to make sure that it got done. I would say, you know, the thing that was most surprising was that instead of everybody uniformly saying it can't be done, I found this split between younger brothers and older brothers saying, well, we're not sure it makes sense, and younger brothers saying, well, this isn't going far enough. And essentially saying, you know, this lodge belongs to both of us, and we have to engage critically with each other and examine what our dues structure and what our financial structure means to everybody. We can't just say, I think this. And so in balancing what we were expecting and sort of changing expectations to meet something more realistic, but also informing brothers with unrealistic standards of what the fraternity should cost as to realistic concerns about the financial future, we were able to get something like all good compromises that left everybody angry. No, that I think it will provide for the lodge for a very long time, and will create a really positive culture of seeing Freemasonry safeguarded for future generations, as those who came before us did for us.
Yeah. I think one of the things about being master of Amicable Lodge is, I was the 135th master of that lodge. When you sit in that chair, all of a sudden you feel that history in a unique way. And you feel all those past masters who've gone to the Celestial Lodge above, and they're all saying the exact same thing to you. Boy, don't mess this up.
Literally said that to me.
Yeah, pretty much. Yeah.
Well, I was speaking on their behalf.
Yes.
Yeah. I think that the idea that you have to secure the lodge for the next generation that's an old idea in Freemasonry. That's an idea that is what prompted men to leave bequests in their will to the lodge. That's what we built all these great buildings, not because guys had tons more spare money laying around, but because they gave more sacrificially.
Yeah.
And because it was more important to them. And I think we have somehow gotten very shy about asking people to give to Freemasonry. And I blame in part the American response to the anti-Masonic movement in this country, which was in part to start as many different charitable causes as we could. It was part of saying, public charitable causes. It was part of saying, look, we're good people. We take care of sick kids. We take care of people who are hungry. We take care of veterans. And there's nothing wrong with any of those charities. People who know me know that I have a very deep commitment to public philanthropy, but that's not Freemasonry. And I think we, to some extent, trained several generations of men to give to those charities and not to give to the lodge.
Yeah, if I may interject for a moment, I think that, David, you really hit on an important thing about, making brothers more willing to donate to the lodge. I think that especially, given that we're discussing dues increases at the moment, I think it's really important to understand that, if a lodge isn't taking its own finances and financial future seriously, no generous donor should take them seriously. And I think that a lot of times people can say, or look at a dues increase and say, this is the achievement. The achievement is not charging more. The achievement is ensuring that the lodge has an understanding of itself as a multi-generational institution and as a disciplined and focused institution towards the future. And inculcating that, not just asking for more dues, because that's simple, that's easy. You just charge more. But having a culture where people are willing to give to see something exist beyond them. Just to, we forget our ancestors, our predecessors were ancient masons. Were medieval stonemasons who worked on buildings through generation to generation to generation, knowing that they wouldn't see it complete. It's that attitude and that reverence for a project that exists across generations that is where we come from, and we seem to have forgotten that financially in the 21st century, and it needs to change if the fraternity is to have a future.
So, Charley, are you comfortable, and it's totally okay if not, because we can totally edit it out if you're not, are you comfortable talking about the program Harmonia had in place for the Perpetual member something?
Sure. We have a Perpetual member program, and we decided to offer an initiative during my year, and it took effect, January as I was coming out, but the program was already in place. And the idea behind it was, what would happen to Perpetual memberships if we offered to pay half of everybody's Perpetual membership that wanted to have one? And so you're looking at $2,400. And so we would pay about $1,200 per person if they would pay about that amount to get that. And we had to really think about that, because how much money are we going to spend? Because when somebody takes on one of those memberships, we got to write that check for every single person that wants to do that.
Yeah.
So we essentially set aside, we had a limit of the number of people that we wanted to do for this initiative to see how it would work out. And pretty much, I believe we capped it at about 15 or 18, I think it was. So we're looking at a lot of money, really. And we had a lot of people take advantage of it. And we said, okay, well, if anybody that wants to do it that goes beyond that number, we'll set up a lottery, and see where we end up. So we don't leave anybody out, try to make it fair. But it worked out pretty well. The caveat to that is, if you leave the lodge and you move to another lodge, you need to pay the balance of that perpetual membership. So, because that's the only way that we were going to be able to make that work out.
So if we use the number $2,400, the lodge paid $1,200, and it
Right.
sounds like you let the members pay over time.
We did, yes. We actually gave them a period of time. We let everybody know last year that this was going to happen, and people were able to start paying in and saving up, if you will, to pull it off. And then we had a deadline that they needed to finish that up. By the time we really got the program, this is our start date, paid, get it paid by then. But you also got to pay your 2017 dues on that too. So it was a pretty expensive gamble for us. I think it'll pay off. But like I said, we were fortunate enough that, because we're in a commercial building, that we finally got all of our tenant spaces rented out. It gave us the flexibility to be able to take that gamble and see how it works. Now, will that program go forward next year or beyond that? That remains to be seen. We'll see how it goes, because it's a pretty big investment into our lodge and into our members. But we had a lot of people that said, absolutely, let's do it, and they wrote that check.
Yeah. So, because I was there last night, and there was, I think, something like 15 people, 16 people that went up and were recognized for it. But what is the point of it? I mean, I guess I don't understand.
How does it benefit the lodge?
Yeah, basically.
How's it benefit the lodge? Well, it benefits the members of the lodge that wanted to do it. The people that wanted to have that perpetual membership were able to really get it at half off.
Right.
For one. But for the lodge itself, it really leads to the longer term as a stream of revenue, because it'll come back to the lodge years from now. So I know the perpetual thing can be a little confusing, but say again?
It's sort of like an endowment program.
It is, absolutely. We invested in our own endowment program for down the road. We're spending money now that we'll get back as an investment later on.
Wisdom.
I'd just like to interject something, actually. Last week, my lodge had its stated meeting. My successor was elected as master of the lodge, and our wardens and secretary and treasurer. I'm the fool who's going to be secretary next year. But we also voted on one other thing, and that was, I'm not going to drop any numbers here, but we voted to increase our price for endowed membership. We increased it by 500%, so it's 6 times what it was. And we did that with the understanding that we wanted to make endowed membership something that would really be of benefit to the lodge if anyone would like to endow. Because we get returns on that perpetually from the Grand Lodge's investment of those funds. The lodge gets a return on that every year. But we wanted to make it so that it wouldn't be so attractive for people to stop paying dues in lieu of buying that endowed membership. So you know, what this has done is it's opened the door for us to have a serious conversation about raising dues at this point, because our endowed membership was set at a really unreasonably low price point, such that if we were to talk about raising dues at any point in the future, it would have been, you know, kind of a no-brainer really for people to say, well, I don't want to pay increased dues, so I'm just going to endow. Now that the endowed membership price is set at something more reasonable, we can have a meaningful discussion about what dues ought to be and what the lodge needs to make from endowed memberships and from dues on an annual basis to support the lodge well into the future financially. And so we have taken on that responsibility and looked to our future to make sure that the lodge can perpetuate itself. And so I'm really proud to say that we were able to do that last week.
That's awesome. Yeah, really awesome.
Congratulations. I think you know, David, that my father was a Texas Mason, and I distinctly remember him putting aside money from every paycheck over a period of quite some time. I don't know how long it was, but I remember him talking about it for quite some time, specifically so he could buy an endowed membership. But the price point had to be high enough that he was saving up for it. And, you know, my parents were, you know, well-off middle-class people. For him to save up for something it had to be enough money that it was something he had to think about, you know. But
and that's the way it probably ought to be. You know, if you're wanting to make an endowment and endow a lodge, it needs to be, you know, an amount that you can, as a man and a Mason, be proud of. Probably not something that's going to be easy to achieve, but that might be a bit of a stretch goal, personally, for any man, so that he can be proud of helping the lodge on an annual basis, rather than I guess taking an easy way out of paying dues.
right. I kind of like the idea that my father is still supporting his lodge. You know, there's not very many things that you do in life that last long after you're gone, but that is, I mean, the idea of it is that it's perpetual. So in some small way, he's still involved. So we're coming towards sort of the end of our time together, but I thought I'd ask each of you, if you had your successor, or a successor, let's, you know, not the particular man in your lodge, but a successor in front of you, and you were giving him advice, what is the one piece of advice that you really wish you could give to the next master? Why don't we start with Nick?
The one piece of advice that I would say to anybody who wants to run a Masonic body, who has gone, a thriving Masonic body, not one where there's a sudden leadership absence. If you've gone through the line, you have demonstrated that you excel in many, many different facets in the fraternity. I think the way that we would best grow, and the things that we most come in conflict with, are our own weaknesses. And my best advice for anybody who would be going into a body is, you know, with the brothers who know you the best and love you profoundly despite your faults, discuss your faults with them. Discuss your weaknesses and engage with them. You know, take it as a moment to do some serious self-reflection before your year begins and recognize your weaknesses, because your year will throw them back in your face. It will. I guarantee it will. You're going to have to deal with things that you're not good with. And by engaging sort of your Jungian shadow, or your the dark side of the moon in some way, or just think cognitive distances in your own mind that your best friends recognize about you, you will take something that's an unknown unknown and make it a known unknown. And in that regard, you are able to better cope with your strategy for the next year, so that you know that you can be a good leader. So the things that you do want to do that have nothing to do with learning about yourself or being master, but running a lodge, you're not going to get in your way, because you're going to recognize problems that you will create for yourself, and you just disarm your worst self.
Yeah, it's definitely true that once you're a past master and you start watching masters in the chair, there is definitely a tendency for people to get in their own way. And it's something that you can only occasionally help people with.
Yeah.
So, Charley, what advice would you give?
I'll say that I am not the man that I started as in my year. When I started my year, I ended my year as a different person. I had all the best intentions. I had all these plans. I listened to my predecessor say, start planning 6 months ahead of time. You should have your year worked out 6 months ahead of time. You should have all these things done. So yeah, communicate, plan, and all that. But I think you gotta set the example, and you've got to be pretty good at everything that you do. Act the role of the leader. But I would say that remember why we're there. Forget about all of the minutia of operating a lodge. You gotta go to each of these people that are looking to you as the master of the lodge, and remember that you're trying to give them the opportunity to make themselves better. You're trying to give them a reason to show up. You're trying to promote for our lodge 125 years of history and all of those generations before us. Why are we there? Because these people showed up when their heart told them to. They didn't show up because they wanted to pass out business cards. Those people don't last. But the people that do show up and that want to get involved in that lodge, get them involved. Give them an opportunity to do something in a committee and take a role. Encourage them. Get that Masonic education. Give them mentors and hold their hand through the process so that they feel a part of the family. Because only then, when they start to look back in their everyday life and they come to you, and I've had people come to me and say this, you know what, something I learned in lodge or something that you taught me, I used outside and I didn't even realize I was doing it. That's when I realized that we've touched somebody, we've reached somebody, and I say, you know what, when you go out into the community, be the light in the community, be the light in the conversation. When you're standing in a room having a conversation with a bunch of other people, be that person maybe looks at it and says, where did you get that? How do you think like that? Well, this is why. And that's my recommendation. When I tell my next master, understand the gravity of the role that you're stepping into. Just like you guys had talked about earlier, many men stronger than us have gone before, and we've got to respect what the efforts that they put into those lodges and carry on. And the piece of advice that I'd gotten when I got there essentially was, leave it better than you found it. Just leave it in some way that you've improved it, whatever it was, and you walk away at the end and you hang up your hat and you say, good job, well done. And if your buddies and all your brothers, pat you on the back and shake your hand and give you a standing ovation that you did a good job, you can feel good about it and you can move on, and that'll be a role that you cherish for the rest of your life.
Very good. Yes. David, what advice would you give your successor?
Well, I can honestly say that this year as master of my lodge, there hasn't been a thing that I wanted to do that I haven't been able to accomplish. And I believe the reason for that is that I had a very clear vision for what I wanted to do. I was able to communicate that to the brethren, and I was able to inspire the brethren. And I came to that with a full passion for what I was hoping to accomplish. And it happened. The brethren saw that passion, and it inspired them and ignited a fire that has really changed the culture of the lodge over the last few years. And everything that I've wanted to do over the last few years has really come about because the brethren were inspired by it. So have a vision, bring all the passion that you can, devote your entire heart, mind, and soul to the lodge, and the brethren of the lodge will respect you for it. As the master of the lodge, you are both the temporal and the spiritual leader of the lodge, and the brethren will see you as that if you play the part, and they will support you as that if you give them the confidence in yourself to do what you're setting out to do. So I have no regrets for anything that's happened this year. I've made a few mistakes along the way, but I've learned from it, and in the end, it's created exactly the kind of lodge that I was hoping to have. My biggest, I guess, role model in Masonry from the past, from those who are dead, has been Wilmshurst. I've taken a lot of inspiration from his writings, and one of my favorite pieces comes from his book, The Masonic Initiation, a chapter where he talks about the ideal lodge. And just a few nights ago, actually, I reread that chapter. It had been a while since I read it, and I came to realize that, well, I first read that probably about 8 years ago. I'm coming up on 10 years as a Mason next month. When I first read it, I was inspired by it. I wanted to see it happen. It's not the experience that I had. But upon rereading it just a few nights ago, I realized that that's the experience that we now have at Jewel P. Lightfoot Lodge. And so I'm so proud that the right people were able to come together at the right time in the right place and make this a reality. And it's been the most exciting and rewarding thing. My successor in office has already been elected, and he's somebody I have full faith in. And we have a similar vision, and I hope he takes it beyond what I've been able to push the lodge to, and I hope it always gets better.
And I think one of the things that marks a really good master is the hope. Is something I hear consistently from guys as they're leaving office, is the hope that the next guy does better than they did. That they provided something for them to build on, and that it continues to build. That the advice that I have, that I got when I was at DeMolay, I think I was 16, and I became master counselor of my DeMolay chapter. And the chapter advisor for my DeMolay chapter, David will recognize the name, was a man named Reese Linwood Harrison Jr. And he's a very accomplished Mason. I think if you look up any of the national Masonic organizations, he's either their lawyer or a past presiding officer, or
you might find his name around here and there.
Yeah. He's a past Grand Master of Texas. He wasn't at the time, but he is now. But at the time, the night I was elected Master Counselor of the DeMolay chapter, he called me over, and we were all, to varying degrees, terrified of him. He was the authority figure in the DeMolay chapter. And he called me over and he said, "Do you want to be a successful Master Counselor?" "Yes, please." And he said, "Then always remember, it's never about you. It's always about someone else. And if every meeting you go into that meeting trying to figure out a way to make some other brother feel good, feel proud to be a member, feel accomplished, recognize someone else's contribution, you will be successful. But if you make it about you, you will fail." And I said, "Okay." But I've never forgotten. I've never forgotten that. And I did try to find ways to, additional ways, more ways to say thank you, to recognize people, to give people cause to be proud. And I think that is something that we sometimes overlook as Masons. We have so many formal ways that we recognize people. In Massachusetts, we have the custom of calling someone up to the east and recognizing them in front of the lodge and talking, And I remember the first time that happened to me, I went to a meeting. I wasn't expecting anything. JR was master of the lodge at the time, and he had asked at the previous meeting for people to go to this Masonic ambassador training thing. And I was a new guy, and so I volunteered to go because I could. And the next meeting, he had the two of us who had gone called up to the east, and he thanked us for going. And I remember how, I was like, well, I did it because I wanted to help out. But getting a thank you made me want to help again, And it made me feel really good about what I had done. And I just remembered he also appointed me Masonic ambassador that night. And after the meeting, I said to him, you didn't even ask me if I wanted to do that. And he said, I don't have to ask you. You're appointed. You can either do the job or not. And it was then I realized that you should never trust a smiling master. So that's my advice to people who are not master of the lodge. Anyway, thank you guys so much for being here tonight.
It's been a pleasure. I really did. Enjoyed it.
Thank you. Hopefully you've helped guys who are considering becoming masters of lodges, maybe helped a few current masters of lodges think about their time in the lodge in a different way.
I'll add it later.
We're not recording. We'll do it.
All right, do it.
Because we have changes.
We have changes.
Changes, yes.
Okay.
So it's time to close out. Thank you so much for joining us tonight. The fantastic photography on our website is courtesy of Brother Aaron Sherman. Our theme song, currently under development, is composed by Worshipful Christopher Duggan. Our website is maintained, curated, and lovingly tended by Brother Nicholas Harvey. So if you have any complaints, call him on his cell phone. Essential canine supervision is provided by Raksha, and tattoos are courtesy of Joe Boo from Chameleon Tattoo in Cambridge, Massachusetts. Many thanks to our Patreon sponsors, who now include Jacob Savlik, Uriah Edwards, and Arthur Shillington. I hope I got that close to right. The opinions expressed in this broadcast and on our website are those of the individual contributors and do not represent the opinions of any lodge, Grand Lodge, or other Masonic body. Please visit our website at 3distinctknocks.org. You can follow us on Facebook and subscribe to our YouTube channel. I'm David Riley, and I'm incredibly grateful for the brothers that have made this podcast and my Masonic journey so rich, interesting, challenging, and fulfilling. I hope 3 Distinct Knocks has helped you make some daily progress in Freemasonry. Thank you for listening.
Thanks, guys.
All right. Thank you.
Hello, brother.
Thank you.
All right. Have a good night.
All right.